So another question I received on the email, and it was why God, the source, chooses to awaken certain people, and why is not awakening for everybody. And to be honest, there is no direct answer to this question. But there is one thing which Ramesh Balsekar would say, and he would say that just as the source decides to create ego so that the interhuman communication can take place, at the same time, it also dissolves ego in the other to create a sense of balance. But truly, we cannot know the cosmic law. We cannot know the basis on which the source operates. Because his words were that the created object cannot know the will of the creator source. Just like, say, I write a program to do a particular computation, all that program can do is execute the instructions that I've given. But it cannot know why and for what reason I created the program. Therefore, our limited minds cannot comprehend this whole functioning, that why some people wake up. And moreover, the thing is that it is only the mind that is trapped in thinking. That is the mind which believes, which makes this distinction between awakening and not awakened. For the source, there is no such distinction, because everything is one and the same. In some cases, that resistance is very low, while in others, there is this incessant need to understand, to know the meaning of life, to question existence. So it is only the thinking mind that blocks this understanding. When you are in deep sleep, there is no concern about anything. Or when we are extremely happy, when you're completely in peace, do you ever think about these things? That why certain people wake up? Is God favoring one group of people over another? It is the thinking mind which creates this idea that somehow people who are awakened are extremely happy and that they have no challenges and there's no suffering in their life, which is not true. Whether you are awakened or not awakened, the flow of life remains same for everyone. Everyone has to face decay, death, disease, loss. So pain in the moment is same for both. It is just that in the case of an awakened being, since that person has no identifications, or let's say that the identifications are very loose in that case, so the pain in the moment does not become suffering in the horizontal time. So awakened people, they see events as happening and not as individual doings. That is the only difference. Other than that, I don't see any difference. I have been with some masters and I see that they show the same emotions as most regular people like us too. I was listening to one of Ramesh's satsang where he recited that story, Footprints. And while reading that story, he had tears in his eyes. So, people were thinking that, here, a sage is sitting here. Why should a sage be bothered with such emotions? And he said that just because I talk about non duality, Advaita, doesn't mean that I am not sensitive, doesn't mean that I don't experience emotions like others. Even while talking about his granddaughter, he would get emotional at times. In fact, I don't see any difference between the two. It's only the mind, which says that I am awakened and I am not awakened. These are just the labelings of the mind. If you drop the thought and stay with the single vertical thought, I am, then none of these questions would appear. Because that is the state of complete surrender. And it is understood that what the source does or God does, only God knows. And we, with our limited consciousness, cannot understand the total functioning of God. It's just like one person undergoes more suffering than the other person. Now, why does that happen? Now, we can say that that person's behavior caused him to suffer more. But then his behavior was also influenced by people around him. His childhood, the education he received, the kind of people he came across. Maybe he was abused as a child, or maybe he faced a lot of hardships in life. In that setting, he had no control. As a child, we don't have any control over our situations. We trust our caretakers, we trust our teachers and the environment and everything. And genetics, that is also not in our control. Therefore, when I'm upset, when my mind is restless, the ego feels that the God is biased. It is an acquisition, towards God. That look, it is choosing to wake certain people and ignoring the rest, and creating this whole conflict and misery and suffering and wars and violence and whatever. But then you are seeing that from a limited, conditioned perspective. It is your conditioned mind, the mind that is attached to the body, the mind that is scared of death of the body. It is that mind which is bringing up all these thoughts as to why God is discriminating. It is not that the God is discriminating. And once the thinking mind dissolves, you see the peace of being, the peace of presence, pure presence, it starts increasing. And in that, these questions are not there anymore. As I mentioned earlier, when you're happy, you don't question all of this. You don't even think about these things. Not only just this particular question, you don't even think about other things like why this life, no philosophy, no thought, nothing, no non-duality, nothing. When you are immersed in bliss, you're simply being. And it is not necessary that every awakened, that everyone who's awakened or who has this, you know, who has this knowledge that their sense of personal self is not there, they do not choose to teach all the time. Some are just regular people who have not studied any scriptures also. While they don't openly talk about it, but they do communicate in some way, either through words or through silence. And the communication that takes place in silence, that is the highest transmission, highest teaching. There is no way to know if a person is awakened or not with the conditioned perspective. So the only benchmark which I feel is that when you're with such a being, when you're in the presence of such a being, you are drawn to his peace and you become peaceful yourself. So these questions doesn't arise when you're in the presence of a sage. The true teacher is not just interested in answering the question. The true teacher will point you in the direction so that your mind inverts. That is the greatest reward for the teacher. When your mind turns on itself, because then the teacher's job is finished. After that, everything takes place on its own. Now, that said, even the mind reverting on itself happens through the grace of God. So it is not that the teacher has the power to do that. But yes, teacher becomes the medium for that sometimes. In some cases, like Ramana Maharishi, it just happens spontaneously. So, just to summarize the answer to your question, it is just that it is our mind which is creating this distinction between the awakened and the non-awakened. We are in duality when we talk about these things. We are in phenomenality. So when we are in deep sleep, there is no you or me. There are no questions like these. So in duality, every individual is undergoing their destiny. And what their destiny is, only the source knows. It is only the source that is acting through that particular mind-body organism. Just like you, the mind-body organism, is also being played by God. And there is a sense of relief when this is completely understood, because it drops a lot of burden which we carry around. We are always concerned, especially towards our loved ones. We want to, unknowingly, we try to control them, manipulate them. We say that we want better for them, but we are the ones who create so much misery for them because of our unconscious attachments. But when the sense of personal identification dissolves, that unconscious attachment becomes conscious attachment. In that, you leave the other person completely free. You don't try to control any aspect of their life. And it frees not only them, but you also from that bond, toxic bond. So your bond becomes, it purifies. So that's the answer to your question. I hope you find it useful.